In tonight's episode, we're going to be checking out some terrifying camping stories, all surrounding the Ozarks. If you weren't afraid of the Ozarks, you will be now. Let us begin. Story 1. Camping was a mistake. The year was 2013. My brother, who was 25, and I, who was 21, had a chance to go camping up in the Ozarks, just north of Jasper in Arkansas. Normally, I'm not really camping savvy, but my brother is the wildlife expert here. Well, maybe not expert, but he's far more of a green thumb than I am, and that means all things outdoors related. I'm more of the gamer streamer type, always have been. So really, this was just more of an excuse to go spend time with my much-loved brother. Before I go on with the story and events that took place that evening, my brother and I grew up very close. We always have been. We're the best friends type of brother. Even though he's 4 years older than I, we still never let that separate us. The events of this night, though, were so traumatizing to both of us, we do not really speak of this event. Well, except for me writing this into you right now. But if you were to ask him, he would not want to tell this story at all. In fact, he doesn't even like to watch werewolf movies now. Or any monster movies for that matter. Alright, enough backstory. So, long story goes. We get to our spot and it's a little more remote than I would have preferred. You know, I like the spigot close by, a bathroom within relatively close walking distance, but this was a little out of my comfort zone, to say the least. It didn't matter though. I was with my brother. I trusted him. I knew he possessed the skills to ensure our survival. And that was before things went haywire. We had a fire going and we were sitting there talking. It wasn't that late, if I recall correctly, maybe 8 or 9 p.m. This also wasn't summertime yet. It was spring, about what it is now, April or May, although I can't remember when or what. He had volunteered for me to go fetch more firewood, off in the dark, and I had a flashlight, so I wasn't too concerned. He was going to start getting the hot dogs prepped, since that was one of our favorite snacks. I agreed. I got up, grabbed my 500 lumens flashlight, and began walking around through the woods close by, looking for any dead branches or anything I could find that would potentially work as kindling and to keep the fire going longer. This is when I first noticed that something was off. Call me paranoid, but I swear I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end as I'm looking for dried kindling. No, I wasn't convinced there was an axe-wielding murderer out in the woods or monsters were hiding behind trees. It was just a feeling I got that I was uncomfortable. And the longer I stayed there, maybe only 50 feet away from the light of our campfire, I grew more and more uncomfortable, like I shouldn't be in there, or at least I did not want to. So, after quickly gathering a small bundle, filling my arms full, I happily ran back to the fire, putting some in and setting some to the side. My brother was just now beginning to roast a couple of hot dogs. I'd only been gone for maybe 5 minutes at most. I should also say that where we were camping was kind of off and tucked away, but it was a campground, meaning there was a bathroom at least, if I had to guess, 200 feet away from our campsite. Yeah, we were the campsite all the way at the far end, with no other really campsites around us, and everything but woods tucked around. So, that means after eating hot dogs, I had to go use the restroom. And my brother made hardcore fun of me because I would not go poop out in the woods with some toilet paper. I had to be a princess and use the bathroom. But hey, I like my privacy and I don't want anybody catching me in the act out in the woods. Anyway, after getting ripped on and my brother handing me the toilet paper, I go off, stumbling my way to the bathroom because it's dark, and once I'm done, I make my way back, and I could tell that my brother's entire attitude had changed. The smirking brother that I had left now wore a face of concern and worry as I came back. He just seemed very stoic, which is not like him. If you catch my brother in a good mood, he can be a complete chatterbox. At least that's how he was before I left, and now he seemed very quiet. We were continuing eating our hot dogs, and I asked him what was wrong, and he just kept looking off into the tree line, looking back at me. telling me that, oh, it's fine. And this is when I begin to worry, because I know when my brother is alert to something, it generally means it's not good. And I don't know what it is, but my brother has always had this weird, call it a sixth sense if you will, where he's hyper aware of his surroundings. It's worked out really well for him in the military, but I'm not like that at all. Things continue on like this for probably the next 30 minutes, maybe 45. After roasting hot dogs, we decided to do some s'mores together. And you could tell the mood is kind of lighting back up, but it's still a little tense. I was trying my best to crack Family Guy jokes and do anything I could to ease the situation. While my brother did laugh and have a good time, you could just still tell in his face and his body language there was something that wasn't quite right, that was bothering him, but I didn't want to dare ask. So, after a while, I got up to go inside the tent to check my phone, hoping I had service so I could text my girlfriend back at the time. After a couple of minutes in the tent, trying to get my phone to get service and failing every time, I decided to put the phone away, turning it off to conserve battery. And when I went back outside to sit down, right across from my brother, he seemed very pale. And I'll never forget this. I looked at him and asked him, "Joel, what's the matter?" And with the most serious expression and tone in his voice, he tells me, "Alan, you need to get in the tent right now." And puzzled and confused by this, and especially his face and his tone, I asked him, "What do you mean get in the tent now? What's going on?" He would not explain though. He just told me again, "Get in the tent now." And so I kind of shrugged, but still freaked out by how he was acting, and I decided to get up and go in the tent and zip up. Half of me at this point is so scared that I'm practically pooping bricks, and the other half is confused and trying to convince myself that this is a huge prank and that he's going to get me with that aha moment any second. But the problem is my brother's a pretty serious guy. Yeah, he laughs and is a chatterbox, but he was never the prankster. In fact, I can count on one hand out of my entire life all the times he's ever pulled a prank on me or done something to scare me. Not to mention the timing of this all just seemed very out of character for him. My train of thoughts was instantly broken up by the sound of someone heavy moving just beyond the tent. Whoever they were very large and very slow with a very deep breath. It reminded me of somebody who was the size of a giant, but also had really bad emphysema. And I'm frozen, sweat now dripping down my forehead, thinking that, okay, there really is an axe-wielding murderer out here, and we're done for. And as the sounds began to move closer to our tent, which it is now behind our tent directly, probably about 30 to 50 feet inside the woodline, my brother is now racing towards the tent, unzips it, and dives into the tent, while quickly turning around and zipping it back up. Without even saying anything, he turns around almost a half second later and scurries in his bag for his knife. Then looks directly over at me and puts his finger to his lips in a shh motion. If there was ever a time I saw my own brother tweaked out, this was it. The movement outside the tent suddenly stopped, and then we could hear nothing. No crickets, nothing. It was just completely silent. This eerie silence, actually. And I guess I didn't realize just how quiet the night had become. I kept asking my brother, in whispers of course, "What did you see? What's out there? What's going on?" And he just kept looking back at me, finger pressed to his lips even more aggressive, and his eyes widened with fear and terror. Clearly something was happening that I was not aware of, nor did I really want to know. And out of nowhere, like a lightning bolt smacking into a tree, this low growl starts to erupt right near our tent. Not necessarily right outside of it, but close enough that it scared both my brother and I to bits. Whatever made it, it sounded like a lion or a bear or something really huge. Of course, like I said, my mind didn't immediately go to monsters or anything supernatural. But the way I was watching my brother tightly grip his army knife while this growl was going really sent a chill down my spine. I know my brother. He's been around bears and cougars and all those things in the woods, and yeah, he is a very cautious man, but this was different. I've never seen him so scared like this. He was definitely on edge, to say the least. The growling suddenly stopped, and we could hear the heavy movement again, and now sniffing like something really big, larger than a bear, dare I say, coming towards our tent, then around it and to the side of it, and then off a ways, and then coming back. All happening within the span of 5 to 10 minutes, I assume, because I didn't have my phone on me, so I could only assume that's how long it was going, but it may have been even longer. And finally, once it came back to the site of our fire, it just suddenly stopped. You could imagine at this point that I was practically shivering. I was so scared. Convinced we were going to be devoured by a grizzly bear or something. But my brother, even though the terrified look on his face remained, he remained perfectly still, all while tightly gripping his knife, ready for this thing to tear through our tent. And once that thing had stopped making noise, I couldn't tell you how much time had gone by, but it had been a while, because at one point or another, my brother turned to me and said, "I'm gonna go out there and investigate." As he whispered it to me, every part of my body screamed at him, "No, it's not a good idea, you need to stay inside the tent," but he did not relent, and instead left the tent, leaving me in there all by myself. So I grabbed a sleeping bag and I think I just shook and shook until I eventually fell asleep, too scared to go outside with my brother, and too scared to stay awake to know what was going on. In fact, I didn't even mean to fall asleep. The next thing I know, he's shaking me awake, telling me, "Come on, Alan, wake up." And I remember being jolted awake, and it was daybreak. It was probably maybe 5 or 6 in the morning. My brother had a look of exhaustion on his face, and deep bags were under his eyes. I don't think the man slept at all. He looked pretty cracked out, and I say that in the most nicest way possible. He kept grabbing my arm, forcefully saying, "We need to go, now, we need to go." After what had happened that night and the events still fresh in my mind, I was not going to give him any hard times. I went right along with him, and we basically left everything there, the tent, our supplies. We just jumped in his truck and drove off. And the entire way back, which was about 2 hours, we didn't speak a word. And I should also mention, too, that we really didn't leave that much supplies behind. The tent we had was a crappy Ozark trail tent that we had bought from Walmart, and we had some minor supplies. Nothing major though, nothing expensive. We had our backpacks and our phones and all the food with us, so really it was just the tent and a couple other things. It wasn't until later that evening that he had a couple of cocktails and was able to relax and tell me exactly what happened. He had pulled me aside and said, "Alan, do you know what happened last night?" And I told him no. I was still partially traumatized from the event myself, and up to that point, I was convinced that a large bear had somehow wandered to our tent, possibly allured by the smell of hot dogs and s'mores, and wanted to devour us. But when I told him my suspicions, he calmly shook his head and said, "Alan, there's things about the forest that many will never understand. What came close to our tent last night was something far more dangerous than any mountain lion or bear could ever be." Then, he had told me that when he was in the military, he had made a couple of good friends with 2 Seminole guys. And on a survival mission a few years back, him and these 2 guys in which he was partnered with on this mission were hunted by the same, or at least a similar, creature. My brother described it. The Seminoles had a name for it that my brother used, but I can't remember because it's been so long. But from what my brother described, we were dealing with some very large wolf, or a protector or guardian of the forest, and not a good guardian, an evil one, or so my brother described it. And I'll never forget that as he's telling me this, his hands and body began shaking, and I remember his glass with whiskey on ice was trembling. You could tell it was taking every bit of his body to remain grounded as he recalled the events with his Seminole friends. And that's why, reliving that experience, he knows for a fact that the first experience he had with his friends, this thing, he told me, had caught his scent and was coming back for him. He revealed to me that the training mission he and his Seminole friends were on, a survival mission, was only about 45 miles away from that camping location, also in the Ozarks. And that's pretty much the most I could get out of my brother at the time. My brother would go on to go through a pretty severe bout of alcoholism and in 2018 become fully sober. Him and I have continued to remain close, but he has not spoken any more of the events of that night or the events of him and his Seminole friends and what they experienced. As far as I know, I don't go camping, and if there truly is a massive monster wolf evil guardian thing somewhere out in the Ozarks, I want no part to play in its nightly adventures. Story 2. The Devil's Den Trail. In late 2016, my girlfriend at the time, now ex-girlfriend, decided that we should take a trip up to Eureka Springs, Arkansas for New Year's Eve weekend, since it was near Branson, Missouri, which is one of our favorite vacation spots. Then, we decided the following day we would drive all the way down south, spending hours to get down to Devil's Den Trail. Not my idea to drive all that way for a stupid trail, but it is what it is. Saturday morning came, and we made our drive all the way down there, getting ready for the hike the following day from our hotel room. I'll skip all the boring details about driving down there, getting coffee, and all that stuff. You probably want to hear our adventures. The entire time we were going down this trail, my girlfriend kept saying that she felt this weird sensation come over her body, like pins and needles, which I thought was strange. I did my best to reassure her that everything was fine and nothing was the matter. And after maybe an hour or so hiking down this trail, she begins coughing violently, and then coughing up blood. Then she starts saying some weird stuff like there's somebody following her and they're making her sick. Just weird gibberish I wasn't really quite understanding, and so I told her, come on, we need to get you to a hospital. It was the entire way back that my girlfriend wigged out completely. She kept frantically looking behind her, telling me, they're following us, they're right there. Although when I looked behind me, I didn't see who or what she was talking about. I just assumed that she was either one, trying to troll me really hard, or two, she was genuinely having some sort of schizophrenic meltdown or something. I had no way to explain what was happening. Her nose was now bloody. I just assumed that there was something severely medically wrong with her, and my entire mission at that point was to get her to a medical professional. Fortunately, we made it off the trail unscathed, but I kept asking her, what did you see? What happened? And she would not tell me, even after the hospital visit. It turns out she had had an ulcer and something else due to stress. I can't remember. But the weird part is that something on the trail triggered that response. And after that, she wasn't the same. She kept mumbling weird things and saying how it possessed her and it was on the trail with us. I told her to stop because I wasn't sure what she was talking about and none of it made sense. After all, I did not see anything, but she swore that there were things following us, small little people that were supposedly invisible to me, but yet showed themselves to her, and they had scared her so bad she had an ulcer. I thought my girlfriend at the time had gone completely loony, but this was a woman who was very science-oriented, and before this nonsense I thought she was spouting, she never even gave the idea of God or monsters a second thought. Once she had calmed down more, which she eventually did, I had asked her if she wanted to go back. But she erupted in hysterics and began screaming violently, hitting me, telling me, no, don't you ever bring me back there. There's something evil on that trail. I don't know how else to explain my girlfriend's or ex-girlfriend's strange reaction to what had happened. Even now as I think back, none of it made sense. My only logical and rational guess is that somehow, while on the trail, she had some sort of hallucination of some kind that triggered her stress response, which caused an ulcer and caused her to go crazy. But it was more than that, because after this event, like I said, she was never quite the same. She would act weird sometimes and act completely out of character. Sometimes it would appear that she would just check out. She would begin talking about how she was now possessed, talking about spirits of the forest and little people and just strange things. Even her close family grew very concerned and tried to get her into therapy. She went one or twice, and even then the therapist was convinced that she had a severe mental illness. I disagreed. She wasn't like that before we went on our trip. And I know this story sounds ridiculous, but something caused her to flip a switch. I don't know what. Obviously, I'm fine. Nothing ever happened to me, and I've heard several other people that have gone on that same trail, nothing. So what happened to her, and why did she flip out? We ended up breaking up in mid-2018, and I've not talked to her since. In fact, I think I spoke to her briefly over Facebook in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, but since then, nothing. I have no idea what she's up to nowadays or if she's even alright. Maybe after I write this, I should check up on her. Thanks for listening to my crazy story. If you guys enjoyed tonight's stories, be sure to go ahead and like this video, leave a comment down below and subscribe for more stories just like these.